Welcome back to Couch Chronicles, Therapists After Dark. Thank you for still being with us and being on the couch with us. We appreciate you being on the couch with us. And today we're going to be talking a lot. But before we start and get the crack-a-lackin', we're going to start with our mindfulness just to ground us into this wonderful episode we're about to have.
As always. All right, so we can get into a comfortable mindfulness position, one that is relaxed to your body, shoulders back, so you can invite some openness into the space. And make any final adjustments before coming into stillness. We'll start by focusing on our breath. Noticing your inhale and exhale. You can slow your breathing down at your own pace. Noticing where air may enter and exit your body. Just take a moment to notice yourself and settle in without any judgments, without wondering about yesterday or the future. Just being present with us here right now. Take a moment to offer yourself and your body some gratitude for getting you through this week. Take note of any sensations. And if your mind begins to wander, gently bringing it back to your anchor, your body or your breath. We're going to be offering ourselves some comfort through the form of touch today. You can pull on this exercise anytime that you need to feel cozy or just need to feel that warm touch. You can cross your hands over, touching your right shoulder with your left hand, left shoulder with your right hand. And gently squeeze as you inhale and exhale. Taking a moment to notice what it feels like to hold yourself. Offering some gratitude in this moment for being able to comfort and soothe yourself today. As you inhale and exhale, you can squeeze a little tighter. Notice any sensations at those pressure points where your fingertips might touch your shoulders, or your arms might cross. Once again, thanking yourself for being present and being able to comfort or soothe any challenges that you might be experiencing. As this practice comes to an end, we can relax our hands a bit. Begin to invite some movement in, moving our wrist around, stretching your shoulders out a bit. Moving your head from left to right. Taking a few more deeper intentional breaths here at the end. And at your own pace, gently blinking your eyes open. Okay, take a moment to notice yourself really quickly. I want to hear from you all. What was your experience? What did you notice about your body, about your mind during the practice today?
I think for me, I had like a busy mind initially starting, and I find myself having a little bit of internal dialogue around like being present. So I just kind of started like repeating that in my mind. then I noticed that my shoulders were still tensing. So there was a thought around like, I think I slept wrong.
Sure.
And then I kind of got into it. I think there was a sense of comfort in like, I noticed my breath was slowing down when you position us to hug ourselves. And I wanted to kind of like really just, I find myself rubbing the side of my shoulders and just kind of like grounding. So yeah, I was able to kind of be present, I think, as time went past by and just really notice my body, notice how relaxed it was, and noticing like the different discomfort I also had around it.
So I'm perhaps hearing that one of the things that we have been coming up in our other episodes is like surrender. So it sounds like today you really had to just surrender to yourself in a way, like surrendering to that your mind was active and just be present. And it sounds like embracing yourself was helpful in that.
Yeah,
practicing.
that's good.
What about you, Stephanie?
I was very in tune to the mindfulness practice around the pressure and the touch. Even I think at the beginning, I found myself kind of like anticipating and wanting to kind of get there when you were giving the initial like kind of like centering with your body instructions. And then I noticed that I felt a lot of release, a lot of relief when I released my shoulders. And that felt really nice. And when I felt that, I was just like, I really sunk down into that experience. I also noticed a fullness in my stomach. I'm like, ooh, girl, yeah, you ate a lot this morning.
You ate.
So I'm definitely noticing that experience. But I enjoyed the mindfulness practice and the way that you guided it and the experience that I had.
Nice. I'm glad that you were able to practice as well. It sounds like also offering that touch really helped you stay grounded and into the practice. I didn't hear either one of you talk about being pulled away very much once you were able to settle in.
Nice. No.
Agreed.
What about you, love?
It was nice for me. I think that I felt very comfortable and steady in the flow and the way that I was instructing. I felt a little bit less prepared when I first started. I think that I had in mind doing another activity, and then as I kind of settled in and started talking, I kind of was just like, what do I really need? So I think that I was really intentional about instructing based off of what I was feeling in the moment, and it felt like we needed some embrace. So.
Yeah. I appreciated your voice also and the permission to like really provide ourselves with what we need as we were hugging ourselves. Because I think that permission kind of just like, okay, settle in.
And we need that reminder, right? That in reality, we do have everything that we need within us, and we can comfort ourselves, we can soothe and take care of ourselves through anything.
Yeah, good deal.
As resilient.
Yes.
Speaking of anything, our podcast name is Therapists After Dark. And I don't know about you guys, but it's been getting a little dark.
It's been getting dark. Figuratively,
and literally, right?
Yeah.
Especially with the climate that we entered and are going to be entering.
Yeah.
Just the question is, how's everyone doing?
So what did everybody was like?
It's giving loaded questions.
Oh, it is loaded
Man.
question. Go ahead, love.
I am feeling a lot of things.
Yeah.
I would say that the one emotion that really comes to mind is stretched.
Yeah.
Not necessarily stretched in the sense of like beyond my capacity, but feeling stretched in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
There is a lot of dialectical tension, like knowing that I perhaps am being called to rest right now, and also recognizing that the people that I work with are also in a really intense need for support right now. So I'm very much pulled between like that taking care of myself and also like taking care of my community.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think you said stretch. I think for me, as I shared with the two of you, these are dialectical tension around like spiritually, how I feel around like my anger. I feel like anger has kind of been like this thing that, one, I radically accept that I am in this moment and like accept my anger, and also spiritually trying to remind myself of like the comfort of faith and the comfort of hope.
Sure.
So going back and forth between that, but making room for all of them to exist, and stretching myself because of like we serve people. I come in contact with people who also carrying like various emotions, and some might be relating to mine, and being mindful, like creating space for their own anger and not merging it with like my anger.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Well, Jay, I think there's also room for you to create space for your rage and like, calling it what it is.
Yeah.
Like also looking at rage as a way of resistance.
For sure. Embracing it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a slightly different experience where I am not as disrupted at the particular moment. I think, after some results were given to the public, right? Yeah. I did note a sense of disappointment. Mm-hmm. And the disappointment was short-lived for me because it reinforced, I think, an underlying, I don't want to say belief system, but maybe a prediction that I was already kind of like having around certain things. Mm-hmm. And I also think a lot of my learning history around dealing with like tension comes up where when stuff is really kind of like in the transition where something has just blown up. Yeah. I would ride the wave of that, like...
Not ready to jump in quite yet.
Yeah, or not even that. I feel like there's like a certain quiet that happens right after something blows up, before something even big, like the ripple effects start to happen. And so one thing that I find myself doing is kind of like maybe rooting because there might be something else that is coming, and trying not to feel guilty because my affect may not fit everyone else's.
Sure. It seems like you're in stillness though, right?
Yeah, grounding,
and like being okay and being in that stillness around like, let me just observe the climate, but observe myself around, the disappointment. Like you said, it was short-lived, but let me just sit and just experience what's happening without really feeling the urge or the need to act on it.
Yeah. I think that part is really important to say, right? Because it is very important for us to hold space for our emotions in that way. Just being able to observe what is happening, what's going on. Yeah. We can be very quick as a people to want to do and take action, and I am encouraging us to rest.
Not this time.
To observe.
Yeah. I will say, like, again, I feel like to clarify, and maybe it's even for myself, is that it's not that the disappointment, I would say maybe the visceral response or reaction within me was short-lived, but definitely the long-standing effects of like, hope that we all collectively had. And I think the guilt, or I think more is better to say, because it's not really has to do with my value system or my moral code. It's more along the societies, especially in the minority community right now, in the Black community right now, there is a lot of hemorrhaging of pain. Yeah. People are feeling a lot right now, and it is very much on them. It's on their face, on their heart, and they're wearing it on their sleeves. And so a part of me maybe feels bad that I am not showing up that way, or maybe concerned that people will assume that I am okay with how the election went or all the results are, because I'm not in this very overtly.
But I think the climate is not that. I feel like the climate is sort of like where you are, in the sense of like, I'm just gonna sit back. I think the initial disappointment may be like for a week, but I think now the climate is around taking care of self, because I've been hearing that a lot, even from clients, or even in the sense of like the emotion could be emotions of like numbness, and where people are just like, I don't really know how to feel, but I know one thing, I feel like Black people are been kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna sit back right now. like it's like, the fruits of the labor has like been done, and it is what it is type thing. But I feel like everybody's kind of been in, majority of people kind of been in your state around
I think I've even found myself in that state as well, and wanting to really be open to embracing it. Yeah. I can be a very doing kind of gal.
That part. I guess I appreciate that support and validation. I think it again goes back to a little bit of my me seeing in my clients who are like crying and are very much like distraught in these very like fawning kind of ways that it reminds me when younger other people around me would have these very like similar responses, and I didn't respond that way, and then it was questioned like, what's
going on?
Like, are you cold? Are you this? Are you that? When I just didn't respond.
And I also think it's an age difference, a generation difference. Because I noticed my generation is like, there's that anger, but there's that, okay. And then there's but I think now when you're talking about like my little sister's generation, they're hurt. They're genuinely
and it makes sense.
Hurt.
They got some more fight in them. I'm not gonna be honest. I love that for them too.
Yeah.
I want to be able to support you all.
For
and
sure.
lift you up.
For
to take the reins.
Yeah.
That's just
in a way that makes me feel proud. It's a sense of proudness.
But I'm proud of them. Yeah.
Speaking of what's so-called people that we are proud of who are coming up, did you guys watch the Megan Thee Stallion?
I sure did. I watched it, and I told y'all need to watch it. We're proud of her.
Yes. Very, very proud. Okay, so first question, what impacted you guys the most when you guys were watching the episode? Or, excuse me, the documentary.
I think the thing that impacted me the most was seeing her relationships with other women. There was a bit of a sense of disappointment, and I think that just seeing the way that perhaps the women around her wanted to encourage her to keep going. It was very clear to me that she needed to pause and like take a break, and it felt like she wasn't being heard, and that was very relatable as a Black woman, as someone who is in the helping profession. There's not really a lot of encouragement outside of the encouragement that we do for each other to like rest, to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So I think that definitely took away from me, like reevaluating some of the relationships in my life that I had with women, and also looking at the intentions, like perhaps in those moments where I feel like I'm being pushed, I could maybe take it less personal and recognize that is perhaps based in some of their own trauma and not necessarily them not listening to me or me being invalidated.
What I took a couple of things away, but one thing that was very profound where I felt like it was relatable is when she went to her mom and saying she was being bullied, and her mom was like, you know, you got this, we're not doing that. And then I think it was that dependency that she had with her mom around, you know, her mom wanted to shield, as a Black woman, you want to protect your daughter in an industry where she's going to be used, but she did not also teach her to think for herself and feel for herself. So it was the impact around that dependency she had with her mom. And also, like, I think what affected me was around, like, you know, as a community, we want our kids to, like, want and push through. And then even after the mom passing, but she had the mom's voice in her head around, keep pushing, you don't stop, keep pushing, you don't stop. And we talked about last podcast that with us as Black women, period, we're told to push through in spite of how we feel and our grievances. And to your point, Ty, it's like, it wasn't until it was getting like max. This girl was grieving for years, for 2 years before she even experienced the other second part of her trauma. But because she was like, my mom, and she kept repeating, mom said you gotta keep going, mom said you gotta keep going. And the numbness around what we do to keep going.
I think I wanna add on a couple of things to what you said. So I think that the grief went back further, because remember her father died
at a young age,
and she did not cry because she didn't want to add on to her mom's grief, and they did not talk about it. So it is kind of I think a lack of practice.
Sure, I was going to say what was modeled for her.
Even knowing how to deal with the grief, because what I see is my mom was maybe depressed visually for a couple of weeks, and then she bounced back because as a woman, a single mom who's now taking care of you. She poured everything into her child. I can't stay down so long that it would potentially affect how I'm going, the quality of life of my child. And that is, I think, a common theme with a lot of people around grief. Being able to sit down and take a break is a privilege. Like, let's just talk about, like, being able to take the bereavement period that people give you at work, that's only something that you can do if you have the socioeconomic status, the balance, the support to do so. Most of us don't have that.
Yeah.
So the grieving period is already stunted for our parents, depending on, what the upbringing is, let alone for us. I can very much resonate with when my sister passed, I got up and went to a different room to cry because I did not want that to be something that was shared with somebody else. You don't want to add that to someone else's pain that you can see in that way. The other thing that you said about the dependency, I think is interesting, right? Because I saw it from the perspective that she was robbed of the ability to learn with a safe space because of when her mom died. Because think about it, the mom support of Megan is not a lot that you see with like moms to their daughters.
I felt like it was appropriate to me.
Yes.
Like the
it was super
age-wise,
appropriate.
what she was in,
But it I said that to say, let me elaborate a little bit more into our attachment, right? It shows that mom really we tend to do this where our kids or even our parents made us so dependent and attached to them that didn't fully teach us the other side that was ugly of their survival part, right? And that part of yourself. Because mom did her best around like, I'm gonna protect you, I'm gonna pour into you because I know this. But then if we want her to have that secure attachment, right? It needs to be a balance between like interdependence and dependency. And I think it was more, you don't trust anyone, you trust me, but then how do I read the room? How do I know who's for me? How do I know, like, hey, these are the decisions? And she really had to tap into a space within herself to kind of fully feel like, okay, it's okay, it's safe.
And some of that was age appropriate, right?
Exactly.
Like that being a
She's in her
transitioning
20s.
age for her, or emerging adult age for her, and like losing your mom at that time is such a...
It's a lot.
Yeah, like this is such a hard thing to do.
I'm having a visceral reaction to the word dependent because I think maybe dependent is used in a negative way. Kind of, not to say that you're using it that way, but
I intentionally said that to normalize it for us.
Okay,
because there needs to be a balance of it's okay to be dependent and it's okay to be independent. And we want to merge those together because you have to teach your children it's okay for me to lean on you and to be on you. And I want you to trust yourself, is that not just because you're young you can't make effective decisions for yourself, but let me fall in that independence so I can learn why you're still here. Does that make sense? And it's, you never know until you step away from it. So mom, of course, you don't know until you step away from it, in a sense of, even at the hospital bed when she was dying, she sensed it, and she was telling Megan, like, trying to fill her up with so many things that she wanted to. But to that capacity, a child becomes numb, and that trauma around like what's happening to you, right? So, and also looking at the other part of, there's a sense of we don't grieve as a people. And that's the push through we always talk about.
That grief.
We don't model and we don't give ourselves permission to grieve. So in that sense, even through the grievance, stuff keeps piling up that we still need to grieve. But if we never even start with the first thing, mom didn't grieve, losing a partner. So then I pour into my daughter, but she also didn't grieve losing a dad. And then it's that
that's constant, a generational thing. If you go all the way back into slavery, if a family was being what's called broken apart because dad was literally just
being
killed.
Being
killed right in front of me because whoever the master person did not think that this person was doing whatever, or my mom was being beaten in front of me. There was no, I have time to sit down and rest.
Or being sold. Or being sold.
It was very much given like, her, it's almost like take the trash out and just keep it moving. So I think that that's another way that generationally, Black people of color, minorities are done a disservice when it comes to healing. You know, because it is not something that comes intuitively to us.
I don't know that healing doesn't come intuitively to us. I think that there are certainly things that people of color have had to do for survival. And I also look at like healing through like resilience, through community, through our like groundedness, our spiritual practices have definitely been a priority, a necessity for Black people in healing. Like the idea of healing, the ideas that are based in like what we do as practice are rooted in like very rich indigenous cultures.
Yeah, and I agree with you because that's what sustained us through the trauma. The power of healing in different ways that we heal our bodies. Because remember, nothing was just given to us, like physically and spiritually.
You had to create that.
You had to create some of that, and some of it is, if you didn't have that, our humanity wouldn't be here. And I think so. I'm in agreements with you and around like. It's not something we tapped into automatically, and it is something that is there that when everything seems dark, we go to what do I need, right? And also the theme, I think, of the whole documentary is push through. I think that's the theme of our lives all the time is push through.
Push through, yeah.
Push through, push through, push through.
I would say also that I really liked how I thought it was really well depicted. I thought that the storytelling was really nice. And I think that the director was very intentional about some of the themes around like patriarchy.
Yes.
The different power dynamics between like men and women in the industry and like how particularly Black women are viewed almost in a way of like, how much can we use you up? Until you've had enough.
Back to the part, what I wanted to write about, what I wanted to say about like what impacted me the most about the episode, which was that like, I was kind of struck by how easy it was, not only for her to hide her pain through like party culture, because it's so much of like, the trauma, the grieving, the inability to stop that kind of allows a lot of us to kind of like mask it through these very like fun things. Like,
Call it what it is, an escape.
There we go.
Exactly. Because, you know, she literally coined the term, driving the boat. You guys remember that?
I didn't even know that until you told me.
She's the one that literally created that cultural trend of like, drive the boat and this, that, and the third, of pouring alcohol into people's mouths straight from the bottle and all of those other things. Come to find out, she was drowning in so much pain behind all of those things. Right? Or even like angered about how quickly people, including her fan base, turned on her when the news of Tory going to jail for what he had done without any evidence, without any kind of provocation. Like Megan has done nothing in her career and outside of it for us to question her to the degree that people questioned her.
You know, in hindsight, I was thinking about it, and as I was watching it, I think it reminded me of your like, your Salt and Pepper, your Madonna's, like every time a woman feel Little Kim, every time a woman show liberation and body positivity and are so comfortable in their sexuality, it's like somebody's waiting for something, society's waiting and the culture's waiting for something to happen to say, you know what, this happened to you because that's how
because
you are.
You're a whore.
And this is this, exactly. And I think even what I appreciate about her mom relationship, I love the scene where her mom was like, hey, you're not twerking hard enough.
I love that. She's like, this is really a thing because you don't see that.
In Caribbean culture, like our parents encourage us when we're dancing, like show them how we do it. It wasn't hypersexualized. It was a comfortability about using our body and being proud of using our body in a way that's fun, that's jovial. So
we also used our bodies to tell stories and to communicate.
To tell stories, to communicate, and to shift grief.
Yeah, exactly.
Movement is healing.
Movement is healing, right? And I think that's why when that situation happened with Tory, it was around, we knew it. Because we saw how much, like it was so much. The Jezebel, yes, it was so much like, you know, she got this. How can we say she didn't enjoy? She's always talking about she loves sex, and she. What does that got to do with somebody being violated?
If that doesn't confirm that we don't live in a sexually oppressive culture, I don't know what is. And just for our folks out there, sexually oppressive culture means it's a process of keeping sexual desires, thoughts, and behaviors down. And women like Megan, Madonna, Little Kim, Charlie Baltimore, all different women of the world, right? All of these women, Foxy Brown, they really challenge the patriarchy, right? And when male-dominated culture is threatened, they immediately want to bring it back to the status quo, where it's, I only want you to show that sexual freedom when I allow it. And that's what really hurt men about Megan Thee Stallion.
Yes,
she did not give it to, and she said, this is mine, it is for my pleasure, and I'm going to give it to whoever I want to. And they was mad because they wanted it.
I think many people look at patriarchy from a very from a white lens, essentially. Like, how can you attain to like whiteness, particularly like white maleness? And I always am like very curious about how the fuck did y'all get black men to buy into this? Like, I know that, I know violence was a reason, but it's like, also, you got a black mother, like, you have black siblings, like, and it's almost like the patriarchy says that like, black men have really fully bought into that in a lot of ways, and it's like, you're just an extension of the oppression.
But they're men. That's the also part that we forget. Like, black men are still men. So in a patriarchy, men are going to...
Innately, also, there's an alpha sense about them, right? Around the need of hierarchy, of knowing that I'm the protector, I'm the strong one, I am this, I am able, right? And I always take it back to, the patriarchy in the Western world of when we came here.
Like, what's the promise now?
But think about it is that, and I've said this in a previous, I think, podcast around, black men had to sit and watch black women being abused, their wife or their partners or their kids being raped, being this. So there's a sense of normalized. I think there was a clip that Viola Davis just released around, I can't think of her name, but she was trying to vote and she was beaten, but she was like, they got two black men who was in the jail cell to come to beat her and abuse her, because what does that teach him? You know what I mean? Around her body, around like, this is what's disposable to you. This is what you can abuse. But do you think they would bring a white woman in with a white man to beat her if that was the other way around?
Maybe.
And it wouldn't. So, but they would, but to what level of would the white man, would he not get to some sort of reprimand?
Psychological, even if it was a white woman, and it's be psychological abuse, because as a white man, I allowed this black man to do this to you, so I still have the power.
Exactly.
So it's all
so I think that's where that thought kind of come from around, and I think even in the videos early on is that black women, and even in music videos and entertainment, became a commodity, right? It became something
like a way to sell yourself.
To sell, because, but think about the key word, I was just about to say it, is sell. We were sold anyway. We were dispensable. There was always a price put on us. The difference is, it's a different price level when it comes to the patriarchy.
Sure.
Right? It's a different
That's
price
forever
level.
changing. It's like morphing into different secret ways to continue to oppress us.
Because now, how much sex does women have to put out for it to sell compared to how much sex does men put out for it to sell?
Well, that's a good point too, right? Because I think that even the acceptance and like appropriateness, like,
talk more about that.
It's like men can talk about all types of things. Talking about sex, money, drugs, and their music, and the hetero.
Because remember, wasn't it that one rapper? His name is escaping me right now, and he had a lyric. If I was I would want to fuck me too.
NLE.
And mind you, all these women, that's gay. That's gay. That's so gay. And it's like. And mind you, look at that. How within the thing is, if I was a woman and I saw my fine self, I would also, it's like...
I sure would want to, yes.
I would. That was convoluted to be, you're now gay. So that just shows how sexually oppressive the culture continues to twist and turn and really, like, minimize.
Sure, like want to bring us back into this like heteronormative box. I also really think that the documentary pointed out some interesting things about violence against women. What did you all think about that? Just how that was portrayed and like reliving that, because obviously we participated in some ways in real time.
We did.
It was during a time where we were all kind of tuned in. There was not a lot going on because it was kind of like pandemic time,
it was pandemic,
right? So
Yep.
But I think that
I honestly was flabbergasted by the death threats. Like, or them telling her, "Oh, I wish."
The internet is a crazy ass place.
Like,
you would never say that to my face.
Yeah.
No, it was just such an odd, but I think it goes back to maybe the conversation we were having off camera about groupthink. This thing of let me conform and punch down. Like there's this whole sociology or maybe psychology kind of phenomenon that people, if they are given the opportunity to, will punch down.
Yeah.
And because this woman who rose, she literally was giant leaping over women
But punching down gives you a sense of control and power.
So men were like, oh, finally she has a target on her. She's vulnerable. I can now reach her. And now they all did it and tried to bring her
And it
all
wasn't
down
only
at
men
once.
who did it. It was also
because
women.
I think that the women kind of kept, that was my point too at the beginning, the thing that stood out to me.
But it goes back to the sexual oppression that Stephanie was talking about. A lot of women, I think, also became envious of the sexual liberation that she also had with herself.
Yes.
That we are so tuned into, you deserve this because you dressed and acted and did this way. Because even some of the comments that was given by some of the women actually was like, wow.
Yeah.
And I also think with rape culture, with rape and violent culture, around how the victim now becomes the villain, and then the perpetrator now becomes the victim, which was interesting to me how Tori automatically, all the stars and the artists and even other people started he became the victim and she became the villain.
Unprovoked. There was literally nothing about
and she became the villain.
This woman that made her to be ostracized to the degree that she was. And can we also talk about how it did a good job of talking subtly about PTSD?
Yes.
Specifically about the hypervigilance and how
anxious she would be.
Because it was unresolved. Nobody talked about it. She would step out of and every 2 seconds, because of also doubling down on the multiple traumas of all the stuff that was happening online. Is somebody trying to hurt me? Is someone going to hurt me? Is somebody going to try to
because you've heard it before.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like it's not something you haven't heard, because you've heard it before around. Online bullying, internet bullying is huge, where people would find all your information, and then they would, as close as an artist is, they can get close to you to harm you.
Which is really strange.
Isn't it?
But that's also showing you dysfunction. That shows the depths at which wanting to be praised by others, wanting to have control over someone else's thing. Because you guys notice, this is kind of new-ish in American culture, but if you go to K-pop, Korean culture, when it comes to it's very common that men will stalk women, will literally try to they'll be having performances and you'll see a man come and try to grab a girl literally while she's on stage. So it's very much ingrained in the worldview of this thing of women are supposed to be for whatever.
Commodity for whatever.
And a lot of times other women adjacent to men like that want to either be protected and not kind of get the fire. And I think that's why a lot of women sometimes double down on that too. It's like a way it's a way of protecting myself. And it's also a way of me being seen as an ally. Because being an ally is a lot safer than being the enemy.
You know what? I thought about that whole time, that Kelsey couldn't be me. I think that it's so that kind of highlighted for me so more than ever that it's really important to be a girl's girl.
What is a girl's girl?
Talk about that.
Okay, so
from your perspective,
I think that from my perspective, a girl's girl is someone who is not so male-centered in their life and their life experiences that they are willing to jeopardize or throw other women under the bus, like you said, to protect themselves. It's really, being a girl's girl is more of a collective experience, and I think that is perhaps something that has been traditional to women, to particularly women of color. Think about the matriarchy. A lot of Black families have women as their head of household. I mean, there's oppressive reasons for that as well, but overall, people often look to the women to see how we should behave, how we should interact, what should we do.
But leadership through care, love, and support usually breeds a much more warm, authentic, less pointing finger type of culture.
Where do you think we lost that as a community, though? Where do you think we lost that
seems
idea
like
of our
that's not what people
matriarch and our
want.
leadership? Yeah.
Well, the United States was never, started on matriarchy. It started off with patriarchy, men being
But
the
as
ones
a people
that
of color, we used to have camaraderie amongst us. We used to have
I think that maybe
'cause
just
I think
survival.
for my culture, we always had that either that grandma or that wise woman that even if it was patriarchy, that
Honestly,
could
Granny
go back
was
to.
maybe. I think the thing that really fucked us up is that perhaps Granny was a pick-me.
that, or I think that's a bit. I'm not gonna say anything about that, but I was gonna say, what about the crack pandemic?
Well, yeah, that would be
because
oppressive reasons why it changes.
One of the reasons why I think that might have brought, because there was a lot of women who got swept up in that crack, epidemic situation, and so that broke down the matriarchy, because if mom is the one that is out in the streets and grandma is trying, there is already now that disconnection,
the deficit
between the groups, and it just became more and more with more disparities financially. Them trying to pump birth control, like there's been so many psychological, mental, physical ways in which that they've broken it apart.
Tried to control
but
women,
underlying within, I think American culture, matriarchy, the plight of women has not been something that has been uplifted in a way that was on the same level as men's rights, men's liberation. Look at how they're tripping now.
I think it's what men have to do to get accolades. It's the bar is
But it's very dog eat dog. That's how it's very much. I ate my last competitors, and now I'm the biggest person. And so when you have that injected into the culture, there's not really. It's hard to really separate yourself from that without getting burned. And we are really good at burning people who are not in the collective.
And I think that you brought up a good point, right? Like that crab in a barrel mentality. I think that unfortunately a lot of women of color have subscribed to that. Like just having experiences with older Black women who maybe kind of grew up in a generation where it was more like, I have to eat my component because there's only room for one of us here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I found that when I'm doing trainings as a young Black woman or a younger looking Black woman, I find that I'll often get comments from older Black women that almost feels like a hazing, like a let me try to see if what you're made of kind of shit. Some of the
they will test you.
Yeah, testing me. And I'm like,
and do we do that to each other?
Is that? Yeah, we do.
We do that to each other, because think about it. It's like,
I don't do that.
I would say that it's
I've
I've experienced it more in a generational thing, not necessarily a peer to peer.
Yeah, because I think that's what it is. It's in the sense of I think the testing is what they say, let me build resiliency.
Yeah.
Let me test you, because when you go out there, you're gonna have the oppressor do that to you. But
the mentality is people won't tell you it outside, so I have to tell you
from there. So that's
I
that's
gotta
my
beat
point.
you down
And then
here.
what it ended up doing is that you're actually doing the opposite of what you think you're doing. You're actually shrinking
me. Yeah.
And then that plays a role into, and I think that's what happened to Megan here, is that even the women around her were giving her the message what's her name? Lorianne. Yeah, she was like, I'm throwing up. My anxieties, I feel like I'm about to pass out. She's like, look, I've worked with the Grace and da-da-da-da-da. And to
keep
her
going.
point,
I know you can do it
because remember, you're going to be legend, da-da-da. And she was telling her in a sense look, you doing it this is not about you. This is about everybody else. Every Black girl, Black woman you're doing this for. So suck it up.
Yeah.
And, and keep going. It's in a sense of I'm being hard on you right now, because if I'm not hard on you, you're going to drown over there. And I think,
and mind you, she thought that was empowering.
And
that's the thing.
And that's the intention part that I talked about
that's
earlier.
the intentionality.
Right?
Exactly.
I feel like I want to let you know, because for them, being filled with that level of responsibility is what kept them from being able to quit. Let's also look at Lorianne's background, where she came from working,
And who she was working with.
And perhaps
working for.
aspiring to be looked at in that way of power.
Also, and again, power and control is an unlimited commodity. It is recognized everywhere, anywhere, regardless. And unfortunately, when Black women even look like they have a shiny bit of it, people are literally like, cannot help but crack their neck.
And that's
like,
the thing, right?
Why, or do you have this thing that I feel like either I'm supposed to have, or I've worked and done these things to get it, or my plight has looked this particular way.
I think that we have it, and that's the thing, right? Like, we have it, and like Black women who have maybe learned the tools to take up space, I'm gonna always encourage you to keep doing so, because I think that when people see a Black woman that is trying to take up space, they want to humble her.
Yep.
They want to make sure that she doesn't get out of line or get above where she's supposed to get. I think that we've seen that in the documentary, obviously.
Yeah.
We've definitely seen that in our most recent election. And I think that that really kind of drove home some facts for me that, like, it doesn't matter what the fuck I do. I'm encouraging people to be themselves. You have somewhere we have to start with not subscribing, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. People that are not committed to understanding you or creating space for you aren't going to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's what Michelle Obama's drive was around, like, remember when she became the first lady, how they wanted to change her, they wanted to acclimate, and she was like, no, I don't know how to not be me. And I think you and I were talking, and you were saying, like, as it relates to when it came to Barack, she actually had the higher education. She actually was the one. She shaped him.
And the thing that she was his mentor.
Yeah, but then it was her intelligence and her education was minimized.
Questioned
and under him, in the sense of, like, he's up here, and I like how he also gave reign to her around that. And I think as a community, if we notice that we're not working against each other and we're stronger, and I think that's what oppressors are scared about, is the fact that...
Or want to create. That's what keeps it working.
If we keep pushing and supporting each other and pour into each other, whatever that looked like, without the judgment, then we would be stronger. But it's a division in our mind, and it's a division that's like, it's a culture construct that we've been made to believe about ourselves. And I think that culture construct is what keeps driving the division amongst us as people of color. Even with this election, it's like, you had like BIPOC people like who actually felt separated. There's a segregation among the minorities of us doing this election. And that segregation, I felt like, was so clearly defined around how and how disconnected we are, and how our mind was so convoluted around the truth about what's going on in our own community and what we're actually experiencing, and the distraction around that.
But I think one thing I wanted to add is that, like, when you divide, like, dividing women, dividing cultures, dividing communities is the oldest trick in the book for
psychological warfare
to keep male-dominated societies in control, right? So in the coming future, one thing that I would add onto what you said, Tyler, is that, like, solidarity between Black women, the Black people in the culture will deliver a huge blow to the patriarchy. And others will follow through modeling. We don't have to necessarily step into other people's culture and issues and things in order to impact them. A lot of people don't realize how much impact Black culture has worldwide. Just being ourselves and representing ourselves is something that people can look at and try to figure out ways to emulate, right, into themselves. So I would say stand firm within yourself. You made a really good point about, like, how with Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, we have a lot of male viewers. Hey guys. And what I would say is that, like, how would you support a Black woman?
How do you uplift Black women in your life?
As a Black man, right? I would say in the same way that Michelle Obama was asked to support Barack in the shadows even though she probably had
A career woman.
you know, the accolades, the ideas, and she did that and supported him in ways that made sense for that relationship and that environment.
Yeah.
In terms of, I'm not going to outshine you where everyone can see and do all these things, but behind closed doors, we're going to have a conversation about, you know, whatever it is that we need to have. So maybe Black men having a similar thing. If someone is showing up, especially a Black woman, in a way that you don't necessarily agree with, maybe not ridiculing her in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of public shame that happens within our culture.
And that too being based in like power and, and oppression.
And so like taking someone over to the side and like, these are some of the things that I saw, these are some of the things that was maybe off-putting about your message. And then going back that way, that's a much more kinder, warmer,
validating,
very more compassionate way to kind of like direct someone, guide someone, right? You don't have to be like
it perhaps kind of leaves more space for like coming up with a collaborative like resolution too. There's more curiosity, there's more room for us to figure it out together versus it being solely the Black women's issue or solely the Black man's issue. But I will say, you know, am I a bad activist if I'm really more focused or wanting to choose rest right now?
No. Absolutely not.
No.
Because in order to become an activist and stay doing the work, it got to come with self. And if self is not okay, and if self is not rested, is not grounded, what are you going to pour into? Where your mind is going to go into fighting? Where's the will is going to go into doing that? So no, I think it's important as an advocate to take time to recenter yourself. And even understanding the message you want to put out, what you're fighting for. Sometimes you may have to sit back
in what ways?
And reevaluate. Yeah, and reevaluate that. Another thing I'm going to add real quick, Steph, is to the point where I'm also going to challenge Black women, because I'm going to challenge Black women is that whether it's in your workspace, whether it's in your friends group, stop judging. Take the time to actually pull someone aside, just like you challenge the Black man to pull the Black woman aside instead of shaming her. We shame each other all the time. Pull that Black woman aside and being like, hey, maybe we had a misunderstanding in the beginning. I was judging you from this. What is going on? The problem with us is that we never know people's stories or plight. And we tend to just jump right into the judgment around, oh, this is how they are, they have an attitude.
And some of that is like hypervigilance, right? Like some of that is like being, again, taught how to protect ourselves and trying to look for the potential threat.
Because what the movie also taught is around, we had this judgment assumption about Megan. And then what we learned, this is a human before she's an artist. This is a human who has human experiences. I know in your workplace, it's not your job to be catering to every person or that Black, because you're trying to survive yourself. But being mindful that when you have judgments about someone, take a step back and say, okay, what am I missing? Or let me have a conversation. It doesn't take much to have a conversation with someone to say, I see you, what's going on? And this is how your behavior is affecting how I move. So how can we support each other? I think one thing that really goes a long way is when people feel seen.
I think that is important too, right? Because we talked about activism, right? And I think that is a very strong way of advocacy. Seeing someone else. And I think that we can do a better job of being in community and seeing each other and being curious about even what it is that we see, not necessarily judging, but just like noticing
noticing that you're gonna judge. I'm not saying don't judge, but when you're noticing your judging is not helping the situation or helping someone or helping you,
or it's closing you off.
Then pull it up.
Or even asking the question when the judgment is present.
Where's
Perhaps am I missing something?
Or is my stuff showing up?
Right, like, because sometimes it's like you can
jump to patriarchy showing up.
Sometimes you can jump to an assumption about someone or an interpretation because of your learning history. You have somehow gotten in contact with somebody that looks like this, that acts like this, that has a vibe like this, And our brain works in pairs. It tries to associate things and make it easier for us. But then sometimes, what do they say? Assumptions make an ass out of you and me. Like, it will be, you're engaging in this way, and that person is actually not like that.
Nope, not at all.
You know?
And I think that you're right, like that being perhaps rooted in a lot of beliefs. I think I really want to stress to people that like they're not giving out fucking cookies for respectability. So it's okay to just be yourself. Do your thing, do what works.
Do you remember those character pillars in school? I swear those things are coming back to haunt sometimes, because it's like this thing about citizenship, right? Remember respect, hearing, and all those things. But I wonder, who were the people that they targeted around wanting to
all of that is based
those...
in like conformity.
Right.
Conform to what this looks like, what is palatable to us, and what is aligned with the patriarchy and who we want to be in power. But everybody is not in tune with that. And really trying to check into like, what is the context of this behavior? What is the context of me being irritated by people wearing their bonnets in the fucking airport? Who cares? Right. You're not getting a cookie for looking a certain way at the airport. It's not getting you any closer to achievement. I mean, Kamala was getting that press every week. Did that make her president?
I will also say that I think, again, rooted in safety, I think conformity, especially in a visual sense for the older generation, was one of the ways that they were able to communicate to other people that I'm non-threatening, right? So I think sometimes when our parents, because I've even had to kind of like do a little bit more acceptance with like when my mom would make comments about how I dressed growing up and about certain things. And I always used to take it as in somehow I was doing something wrong instead of it being like, oh, she was trying to keep me from being
perceived
seen,
or looked at a certain way.
Like in a particular way. And it is unfortunately something that happens, even though I'm not a person who judges people. Like I'll see something and I'll be like, oh, I would not wear that, but you know, that I'm not taking you as less or nothing of a person. But one of the things I wanted to add for the activism part, I also believe that rest is necessary. So what is activism, right? It's one of those buzzwords that I think people use a lot these days, but it really just is direct and a public method of like trying to create change, social change, political change, any of those things. So for me, when you choose to pause a particular way that you are like being active, that it might be going to protest, that might be, you know, reposting and putting all of these things on your social media. Maybe
providing pro bono work.
Right, pro bono work. That might be an area where you feel a little burnt out in. You feel stretched and you're just not really at a place to give. You can pause in that area, right? When you start just doing because you feel like you're supposed to do and that's what it's meant, that's when it becomes performative. All activism is exhausting, but I think the difference between performative activism and very genuine, authentic is with performative exhaustion, your body and your mind get tired. But when you're doing that genuine, authentic activism, your soul gets tired. So for those of you guys, if you feel like a deep tiredness within you, right, it might be just time to rejuvenate, take a step back, and then tap into what do I have left to give, and what arenas does it make sense for me to put those spoons in?
I think that Toni Morrison, her documentary, she worked on the autobiography of Angela Davis. And during that particular time, there was a lot of stuff going on in the United States, just around like oppression of Black people. The Black Panther Party was very active during that time. And I recall her saying in the documentary, just talking about how like, maybe she was not in a space to be on the ground, but her being the editor for that autobiography was her way of creating an activist space, telling the stories.
Telling the story.
So there's so many ways for us to really provide advocacy. That don't necessarily have to look like I'm posting this on the Instagram or I'm wearing a blue bracelet, so you make sure that you know that I'm not one of those.
Right.
There's so many ways to
do
genuinely show up within the skill set that you have, and I want to encourage us to look at that for each other.
This was a great conversation.
It was.
This was a great conversation, and we're gonna stop here. But we are encouraging you to subscribe to our YouTube,
Yes.
and to follow us on Instagram at Couch Chronicles Therapist After Dark.
Also, if you are interested in writing into us for some letters, you can reach us at couchchroniclestad@gmail.com.
All right.
See ya.
Bye, guys.